Hey guys, Luke here on Sean's channel. Today I'm bringing you guys another deck profile. This is my pure Fire King build. I think this deck is pretty good. The fact that the majority of the cards come in the Fire King structure deck is great, meaning that this deck is relatively budget enough. We did add a few cards to make the price go up a good little bit. However, there are many different ways that you can play Fire Kings, but this is just going down the pure route, so it's slightly more budget than some of the other variations you might see out there. I wouldn't necessarily say that this is the strongest version of how to play Fire Kings, but it's still pretty good and I find it to be pretty fun. I think this is a nice introduction to get you into Fire Kings. So without further ado, let's just get straight into it. This is Fire Kings. Starting things off, we have 3 copies of Sacred Fire King Garunix. The reason why I like this card so much is the fact that it's easy to bring out, because if a monster that was originally Fire, Destroy, Battle or card effect, you're able to special summon this card from your hand or your graveyard. And the reason why that is so good is because one of the main gimmicks of Fire King is the fact that they're able to destroy each other to get multiple different effects. So you have no problem with a fire monster being destroyed, so you're able to bring out Garunix as quickly as possible. But not only that, if Garunix is normal special summoned, you can destroy one fire beast, beast warrior or winged beast monster from your hand, deck or face up on the field as well. So it's a good way of getting some of your other Fire King monsters into rotation from your deck directly, and since it destroys them from the deck, it means that they're able to get some of their abilities to pop off too. And if you do that with the effect of this card, then this card gains attack equal to half of the destroyed monster attack. So you're able to get Fire King Garunix up to a really high amount of attack, so he might be able to swing in for game. In most other builds you wouldn't run 3 copies of him, but since this is the pure Fire King build, I didn't want to use any other external engines, hence I had to max out 3 copies of Garunix. But if you want to play around the ratios, that's absolutely fine. I just find that we're doing a pure Fire King build, we might as well run them at 3. So 3 copies is what we run them at in this build. Sticking with the high level Fire Kings, we run 3 copies of Fire King High Avatar Kirin. Kirin is great because it has an effect during the main phase, and it's a quick effect so you can use it during your opponent's main phase as well. Then you can destroy one other fire monster in your hand or face on the field, and if you do, you're able to special summon this card. Which is great because one thing about the Fire King structure deck is that it came with a card called Fire King Sanctuary, which allows us to XZ summon during our opponent's turn, which means that we're able to have 2 level 8s on the field, XZs into Garunix Eternity, and that's able to be a board wipe right there. So Avatar Kirin is a good way to get another level 8 onto the field that way, in order that we're able to pull that off to get the board wipe. But not only that, the effect of this card when it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard is that you can special summon 1 Fire King monster from your hand or graveyard, except for Fire King High Avatar Kirin, and then you can destroy 1 card in the field. So it's just a great reborn and a pop as well. I definitely recommend you guys run it at 3 copies. No matter what the variation of Fire King is, I always see this card run at 3, so I definitely recommend you guys do the exact same. And then the last high level Fire King card we have is Fire King High Avatar Garunix. We do have to run this card just because you do need to run him specifically at least 1 in order to get your Fire King Ulcanix effect to fully pop off. So it is important that you need to run this guy at 1. He is a little bit of a brick, but he is necessary to get some of your plays off. But he does still serve a purpose because once per turn during the next standby phase, after this card was destroyed by card effect and sent to the graveyard, you're able to special summon this card from the graveyard. And if you do, you can destroy all other monsters on the field. So he's a nice little board wipe within himself. But honestly, we don't really use that effect too often, we mostly just use them for Ulcanix. Speaking of which, we have 3 copies of Fire King Courtier Ulcanix. If this card is normal special summon, you can destroy 1 other fire monster in your hand or face up on the field. And if you do, you can add 1 fire beast, beast warrior or winged beast monster from your deck to your hand, except for Ulcanix. And then you can make this card's level become that added monster's level. Which is pretty good because then if we're searching level 8 in the likes of Kirin, that means we're able to get Ulcanix up to 8. And then if we're able to get Kirin onto the field, then we're able to XZ summon into Garunix Eternity for a board wipe. Which is just very good in itself. But that's not all Ulcanix can do. She's also the reason we need to run Fire King High Avatar Garunix, because her secondary effect needs him, in the sense that if this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 Fire King High Avatar Garunix from your deck in defense position. And it needs to be that monster in particular, it can't be any of your other Garunixes in the deck. So I think that's pretty good. The fact that the other guy is a level 8 as well, it's great to go for Garunix Eternity for the board wipe. I definitely think it's worth running Ulcanix at 3 copies. We run 2 copies of Fire King Avatar Arvata. Arvata works as a monster effect negate because if this card is face up on the field and your opponent activates a monster effect, you're able to quick effect negate the activation, and if you do, destroy one other fire monster in your hand or face up on the field, which I find to just be a very good monster effect. The fact that we're able to normal summon this guy and have an instant monster effect is pretty good. But not only that, if this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can target one fire beast, beast warrior, or winged beast monster in your graveyard, except for Arvata, and then you're able to special summon it but negate its effects and also destroy it during the end phase. Which is fine because we're able to destroy this off of Garunix's effect and directly send it from the deck to the graveyard. We're able to get another body out onto the field and then go for some link plays, so we don't really worry too much about that effect negation. Most of our other Fire King monsters effect activate in the graveyard anyways after they're destroyed. So Arvata I think is a definite to run at 2 copies. I also like to run 1 copy of Fire King Avatar Rangbali. Rangbali is slightly easier to bring out as opposed to Arvata, because where Arvata you do need to bring out by the way of a normal summon or cheat him out some other way. Rangbali has the effect that if a face-up Fire King monster you control is destroyed by a card effect, while he's in your hand you're able to special summon him. So it's a nice way that we're able to just special summon him without too much commitment. Rangbali has a very similar negation effect to Arvata, but rather than negating a monster effect, it negates a spell/trap card effect, which is a quick effect as well, so it's a great way to have some spell/trap card negation. And then if we do negate with his effect, then we destroy 1 fire monster in her hand or face up on the field as well. That's why I think Rangbali is pretty good, but I wouldn't really be running him any more than 1 copy just because he doesn't really have a good graveyard effect. Just for 1 copy of Fire King Avatar Barong. Barong is fine, but mostly just use him because when we're able to use Sacred Fire King Garunix's effect to destroy a Fire King monster in the deck, we're able to destroy Barong so that we can get his effect that during the next standby phase, after this card was destroyed by card effect and sent to the graveyard, we can add 1 Fire King card from the deck to the hand. And that could be any Fire King card, doesn't necessarily need to be a monster, it can be one of our spell cards as well. Then finally, 3 copies of Legendary Fire King Ponix. This is arguably your best starter in the deck because if your monster that was originally fire is destroyed by battle or card effect, you're able to special summon this card from your hand. And then if this card is normal or special summon, you can add 1 Fire King spell trap from your deck to your hand. So mostly with that, you're going to be searching your Sanctuary, which is able to get you your Fire King Island, and then you're able to pop off your plays from there. Not only that, Ponix has a good recyclable effect in the sense that during the next standby phase, after this card was destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can add this card from the graveyard to the hand, which I just find is really good to keep a good hold of your resources, so I definitely think Ponix is important to run at 3 copies. Hand traps now, 3 copies of Ash Blossom. Ash Blossom is just a very good universal hand trap, but it's also a fire, so it can mesh well with some of our effects. 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird, it's just a great lingering effect, it can keep combo decks in check as well, so 3 copies I think is essential. And finally 3 copies of Effect Failure, it's just a good effect negation during your opponent's turn, I think is worth running at 3. Going into the spells now, I like to run 2 copies of Fire King Sanctuary and 2 copies of Fire King Island. Sanctuary is usually the card you're going to be searching off of Ponix, because when Fire King Sanctuary is activated, you're able to place 1 Fire King Island from your deck face up onto your field zone. Sanctuary has the effect that once per turn, if the card in your field zone be destroyed by card effect, you can destroy 1 fire monster in your hand or face up on the field instead. That's not only great protection for Fire King Island, but also if we're able to destroy 1 of our Fire King monsters in our hand, that could get us some pretty decent effects too. Not only that, Sanctuary also has the effect once per turn, if your opponent special summons a monster, you can immediately after this effect resolves exile summon 1 fire exile monster using only Fire King monsters that you control. That monster you'll be going into will be Garunix Eternity, which of course is a board wipe. So if you play your cards right and your opponent is kind of popping off with their combos and you're able to activate Sanctuary, go into Garunix Eternity, you're able to wipe their board and completely mess up any progress that they're going into. So that's why I find this card to be very good, but also the fact that it gets Fire King Island out is great too, because Fire King Island has some pretty powerful effects that can help us with our combos. So it has the effect that during your main phase, you can destroy 1 monster in your hand or field, and if you do, you can add 1 Fire King monster from your deck to your hand. You can activate this effect, or you can activate the other effect, where if you control no monsters, you can special summon 1 Fire Winged Beast monster from your hand. So 2 very powerful effects. You can only activate 1 or the other per turn, but still both great to get your combos going. The only one downside of Fire King Island is that if this face-up card in the field zone is sent to the graveyard or banished, you must destroy all monsters that you control, which can be quite bad. However, since Fire Kings actually do get powerful effects off of them being destroyed, 9 times out of 10 it could work for the better. So 2 Sanctuary and 2 Fire King Island. I also like to run one copy of Fire King Skyburn. This card is a nice little bit of interruption that we're able to search off with Ponix. Has the effect that you can target an equal number of Fire King monsters you control and cards your opponent controls and then destroy them. That's not just good removal for some of our opponent's cards, but since our Fire King monsters have effect when they're destroyed, sometimes this can help you pop off as well. But not only that, if a Fire King card you control be destroyed by card effect, you can banish this card from the graveyard instead. So there's a good bit of protection for your Fire Kings as well. So one copy of Fire King Skyburn I think is all you need. I also like to run one copy of Firestorms over Atlantis. I think this card is pretty good, although I wish that it was a bit more impactful than what we actually got, because this can work with both water decks or fire decks. But the reason why we run it here is that it has the effect you can destroy one fire monster in your hand and then you can draw one card. So that is pretty good, because not only is destroying fire monsters good for us because we're able to get some good Fire King effects, but also the fact that we're able to draw is decent as well. But what I like to mention about this card more so is the fact that it also has a secondary effect in the grave, that if your opponent controls a monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then you can target one level 7 or 8 water or fire monster in your graveyard and you're able to special summon it, which I find just be pretty good in cases where we need a bit of recovery. So Firestorms over Atlantis is a nice little tech option to run. I also like to run one copy of 1-for-1. It's just a good way for us to get our Ponix in rotation as quickly as possible so we can really get our plays going. We also run one copy of Prosperity. I've seen a few builds run a few different pot cards, more namely Pot of Extravagance is a good one. But I like to utilize my extra deck a bit more, so I think Pot of Prosperity is better for this build than Extravagance would be. But depending on what way you want to play the deck, that's absolutely fine. If you want to not rely on the extra deck so much, maybe Extravagance might be something a little bit better. But for this build, one copy of Prosperity is all you need. We run one copy of Caught by the Grave and 2 copies of Crossout Designator. This is a combo deck at the end of the day, so we don't want to be interrupted, and we do run a lot of hand traps that can be used for Crossout Designator targets as well. So I think that this is a good ratio to help protect us. And then finally, rounding out the deck, 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, just another great hand trap and also a very important Crossout target as well. Going into the next deck now, we run 2 copies of Garunix Eternity. This is the Xyz fire monster we go into off of our Sanctuary's effect. It needs 2 level 8 monsters in order to go into him. And then if this card is Xyz summoned, you can destroy all other monsters on the field. So you can see how powerful it can be that if you're bringing this out during your opponent's turn, just wipe their field. It's a great bit of interruption to stop your plays dead in their tracks. But that's not all this card does. You can also detach one material from this card and target one spell trap on the field and destroy it, and then if you do, this card gains 500 attack, which is a permanent increase as well, so I find that to be really good, considering how good his attack stats are already with 3000 attack. But also, if this card is destroyed while it has material, you can special summon Fire King monsters from the graveyard up to the number of materials that this card had. So it's a nice bit of resurgence. I definitely think running it at 2 copies is important for this build. I would consider running at 3 copies if we were playing Extravagance, but since we're not, I think 2 is all you need. The rest of the monsters in this extra deck are all link monsters, and a lot of them are pretty generic, so I'll probably try and go through them as quickly as possible. I like to run one copy of Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. It needs 4+ effect monsters in order to go into this card, which is fine because you're able to use one of your opponent's monsters as link material for its link stone, which I think is pretty good, and considering that Fire Kings are able to flood the field as quickly as possible as well, with all their effects are able to special summon each other out, I think we have no problem going into Underworld Goddess of the Closed World, while also removing one of our opponent's more problematic monsters. The reason why I think is good because when this card is brought out, you can negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls. This link summon card is unaffected by your opponent's activated effects unless they target this card. And also once per turn, when your opponent activates a card or effect that special summons a monster from the graveyard, you're able to quick effect negate the activation. So Underworld Goddess is pretty good for that. I'd like to run one copy of Accesscode Talker. Accesscode Talker is a good OTK enabler. If we're going into him using monsters with a high link rating, we're able to get his attack up to a ridiculous amount. And also considering all the other monsters in this extra deck are link monsters, we're also able to use this effect to banish link monsters from our graveyard and destroy cards our opponent controls for each link that we banish. So I definitely think Accesscode Talker is very good for that. We run one copy of Salamangreat Raging Phoenix. This card of course I don't have right now, but it's definitely worth running in the deck if you do. It's going to be reprinted soon anyway, so I'm sure it'll be in my hands in no time. It needs 2+ fire effect monsters in order to go into them. And it also has the effect that if a face-up fire monster you control is destroy a battle or card effect one of those cards in your graveyard, you can target one of those monsters, special summon this card, and if you do, this card gains attack equal to that monster's attack, which I find just be pretty good. Some of our fire monsters have some pretty high attacks, so we're able to bring out this guy again to gain the attack stats could be pretty ridiculous. So I definitely think Raging Phoenix is worth running a 1 copy. We also run 1 copy of Worldsea Dragon Zealantis. Zealantis is pretty good in this build because since we run a lot of link monsters, we're able to run a bunch of them that have link arrows pointing to the left and the right. And if we're able to get his effect to pop off, that's able to banish pretty much all monsters in the field and then resummon them. We can get a pretty big long co-link of a bunch of our monsters back onto the field, and then use his effect to destroy monsters our opponent controls up to the number of co-linked monsters. So I think Zealantis is fairly good to run in this deck. We also run 1 copy of Amphibious, Swarmship, Amblowhale. This is one of the monsters I mentioned that has link arrows pointing to the left and the right. It gains 200 attack for each link monster in the graveyards, and also you can use each of the following effects once per turn. One effect being that if this card is destroyed, you can target 1 link 3 or lower monster in either graveyard and you can special summon it. Or if a link 3 or lower monster on the field is destroyed battle or card effect while this card is in the graveyard, you can banish this card from the graveyard and destroy 1 card on the field, which I just think is pretty good. So 1 copy of Amblowhale I think is very important for the build. We also run 2 copies of Promethean Princess as well. If you are playing this deck with Extravagance, then you definitely need to run Promethean Princess at 3. I find 2 is all we need for this build right here. Whilst she's face on the field, you cannot special summon monsters except for fire monsters, and you can only use each of the following effects once per turn. During your main phase, you can special summon 1 fire monster from your graveyard. So that's a good way of getting more material onto the field, so you're able to get her off the field as quickly as possible to go for your link 4. But also, if a monster is special summoned to your opponent's field while this card is in the graveyard, you're able to target 1 fire monster you control and 1 monster your opponent controls, destroy them, and then if you do, you're able to special summon this card, which is absolutely crazy. Not only is it destroying opponent's monster, but it's also destroying one of our Fire Kings as well, meaning that we can get some extra advantage off them too. So 2 copies of Promethean Princess I think is very important. The rest of these are kind of just staples, so it breezes through them. 1 copy of Unicorn, great way to get rid of some problematic cards. Phoenix is great because it can get rid of some spells and traps. Hita, the Fire Charmer, is great because it's able to steal some of our opponent's fire monsters, i.e. their Ash Blossoms in the graveyard, and then special them to our Earth field, so we're able to go for some of our plays like Promethean Princess. I think Hita is very good for the strategy. 1 copy of Salamangreat Sunlight Wolf. It's just a good way for us to recycle. Some of our fire monsters are a little harder to get from the graveyard, so Sunlight Wolf is pretty good for that. And then finally, rounding off the extra deck, 1 copy of IP and 1 copy of SP. Just a great lethal combo to get some interruption during your opponent's turn. I think these are essential for most decks nowadays. Going into the side deck now, 3 copies of Lava Golem. Lava Golem is not only great because it's a kaiju that basically gets rid of 2 monsters as opposed to 1, it's also a fire monster as well, so it has great synergy with our deck too. So 3 copies of Lava Golem I think is great for the side. We also run 3 copies of Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. There are a lot of decks that do special summon from the graveyard. They add stuff from grave to hand, and also they banish cards from graveyards. So Ghost Bell is not only very good for stopping decks that do that, but also the fact that we special summon from graveyard a good bit as well. Our opponent might be siding Ghost Bell in against us, and considering that we have Crossout Designator, it's no harm having Ghost Bell on the side, so we're able to Crossout Designator Ghost Bell if our opponent tries to do that to us. So 3 copies of Ghost Bell is a good option in the side deck as well. Against back row decks, 3 copies of Cosmic Cyclone. This is good against decks that like to run Floodgates and the likes, so Cosmic Cyclone is pretty good for stopping those guys. And also, one of my favorite side deck tech options is 3 copies of Dark Ruler no more and 3 copies of Evenly Matched. Dark Ruler just negate all face up monster effects that your opponent currently controls. Spell speed 4, so your opponent can't really interact with it a whole lot. And then Evenly Matched just to make them banish a bunch of their cards face down at the end of the battle phase. I just think it doesn't get much more powerful than that. So that's how I like to round off the side deck of this profile. So that does it for the deck. Please let me know what you guys think. I'm really happy with the way this deck turned out. Again, there's multiple different ways to play Fire King. So even if you don't like this version, you're able to play multiple different versions. Sean has a very good Fire King Tri-Brigade deck profile on the channel. If you guys want to check that out as well, give that deck a try too. That's another route that you guys can take this deck down. If you guys are interested in building this deck in real life, we have a TCG player affiliate link down in the description. So if you use that to build this deck, you'll definitely be supporting the channel and helping us out in that way. Other ways to support the channel is by liking the video, subscribing, and leaving a comment as well. And also, if you guys could consider becoming a member of the channel, that helps directly support us as well. Big shout out to Kirin Thompson. Thank you so much for being our first member. We appreciate your continued support because it helps motivate Sean and myself to keep bringing you videos just like this one. So thanks again. I hope all you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.